He's big, he's bad, and he's blue. The next big-time MCU villain coming at you on the big screen is the powerful, time-traveling Kang the Conqueror. The heroes certainly had their work cut out for them, but which ones actually stand a chance against him? Well, let's take a couple guesses. Only few characters in the MCU have as much experience with the concept of alternate realities and timelines as Kang does. One of the few who do, however, is Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch. When it comes to superpowers, being able to straight up alter reality is a pretty big one, and that's exactly what Wanda can do. In the comics, her magic has been used several times to rewrite the whole planet, whether by her own desires or others tapping into her powers to do it for them. And we did get to see her put up the hex around a whole town to turn it into a pastiche of sitcoms through the ages in WandaVision. And remember, that was all before she was empowered by the Darkhold and went just a teeny tiny bit cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So there's really no question that, should it come down to a straight brawl against the guy who regularly tries to rewrite history to his liking, Wanda would absolutely have the necessary power to take him down. And in case she needs backup, Agatha is still mulling around in Westview and could probably be coerced into helping her out. Just like how they beat Kang together that one time in the comics. While today Kang is mostly known as an enemy of the Avengers as a whole, his first appearance actually saw him go up against the first family, the Fantastic Four, back when they encountered his Rama-Tut self, who was posing as a pharaoh in ancient Egypt. As a result of this first encounter, Kang and the Four have butted heads many times in the comics. And with Reed's keen scientific mind often coming up with ways to counter Kang's huge attack, the grouchy Smurf often ends up meeting his match against them. And considering the current lineup of upcoming MCU movies, setting up an encounter between them would actually make a lot of sense. Kang is about to make his big supervillain debut in Ant-Man Quantumania, the Fantastic Four are currently planning to join the MCU in 2024, and by 2026, we'll have an adaptation of Secret Wars, where they all appear together. Although Kang's role in that story was rather brief and anticlimactic. But it's not like there's anything keeping the MCU from fudging the adaptation a bit and making Kang a much bigger threat, even if he doesn't turn out to be the main antagonist. Wanda isn't the only magician on the block who could give Kang a run for his money. After all, she was defeated in her attempt to tear through the multiverse not just by America Chavez, but by the not currently official Sorcerer Supreme as well. People tend to underestimate just how absurdly powerful Strange's magic actually is. Across his many decades in the comics, he's had his hands in just about any type of magic you can possibly imagine, including the ability to manipulate time in various ways. And besides, much like the Fantastic Four, he too has taken a trip to ancient Egypt and duked it out with Kang back when he called himself Rama-Tut. So there's your comic book accuracy if you need it. And since we've seen in Multiverse of Madness that Strange is only getting more wild and creative with his spellcasting, there's no doubt that he'd be able to put up a heck of a fight against Kang. Now, Spider-Man is not the hero you most associate with major world-altering events. Not that he hasn't seen his fair share of them, but he's called the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man for a reason. He largely sticks to street-level superheroics and fights villains who threaten the common man. However, while he doesn't have powers that stretch as far as messing with reality like some of our other candidates, he is an incredibly strong opponent. In fact, he's strong enough that Kang once attempted to kill the Avengers using a robot double of Spider-Man called the Time Spinner, at least until the real Peter managed to foil his plans. And let's not forget that on top of his spider powers, Peter has a scientific intellect that is nearly on par with Tony and Reed. When he has access to the tools that allow him to utilize it, he can whip up some really amazing gadgets to help him save the day. But therein lies the problem. With all of his support network having forgotten about him after No Way Home, Peter is back to square one. At least until he gets on good terms with someone who does have these kinds of resources. So yeah, Peter can absolutely threaten Kang. With a little bit of luck and some help. What do you do when some time-traveling maniac starts causing a ruckus? Well, that's easy. You call in an actual god. Thor has only been growing more and more powerful as the MCU has progressed, which is no small feat considering he literally started out as a Scandinavian thunder god. Don't forget, it was him who managed to beat the crap out of a fully Infinity Stone-powered Thanos back in the Infinity War, and by now he has even gone up against abstract powers of the universe themselves. Well, okay, Thanos did do the snap and turn Thor into a depressive wreck for a good 5 years, but still, he was really wailing on him for a while there. And the two of them do have quite a bit of history in the comics as well, with Kang usually having to resort to some sort of trickery to get the Odin Sun out of his hair for a while. Still, that never stops Thor from eventually breaking free and handing Kang his green baggy pants butt cheeks to him on a silver platter. Okay, most of the guys mentioned so far have some fancy powers that can match Kang, be it magic, acrobatics, and some amazing tech that can fight him on even footing. But sometimes you really just gotta knock a mother the crap out. And that's where our favorite big green beatdown machine comes in. Much like Thor, Hulk is often considered one of the biggest threats to Kang, and he will do absolutely everything to get rid of him in order to make the rest of the team easier to deal with. He's done this in a variety of ways through the ages, with one of his more extreme attempts being that he tried to get one of Bruce's ancestors killed back in World War I, only for Bruce himself to end up in that time period as well and put a stop to that, of course. But since the current MCU Hulk has all of Bruce Banner's scientific know-how on top of his brute strength, he's actually an even bigger problem for Kang to handle, since he can match him on all fronts. He is definitely going to have to take some really extreme measures to dodge those big green fists, that's for sure. Alright, we're all waiting for him to show up anyway, so he might as well do it in style. Deadpool could totally take on Kang. The stars are completely aligned for him to show up too. Not only did Marvel Studios acquire Fox and all of its properties, they've been steadily introducing time travel and multiverses and are even planning on covering Secret Wars, which is a title that has been used for major crossover events between various universes in the comics before. So it's a perfect stomping ground for Wade to stumble into, guns are blazing, meta-quipping about the whole thing the entire time, all while he beats Kang so hard all his variants feel it. And besides, they did actually meet in the original Secret Wars. A little comic titled Deadpool Secret Wars revealed that the Merc with the Mouth was actually right there on Battleworld all along, and prevented Kang from taking out Captain America early in the game, with a well-placed donkey kick right in the clockworks. No wonder Kang was out of commission for the rest of that story. That looked like it hurt! While Vision is an incredibly powerful hero in his own right and a big asset to the Avengers, he's always played more of a support role and hasn't really had much of a hero career on his own. But that doesn't mean that he hasn't pulled his weight in many of the Avengers' scuffles against Kang, both thanks to his sheer strength and his ability to counter much of the Conqueror's tech, thanks to being a super advanced artificial being himself. He's also the sort to always have a backup plan. Remember, he was the one who put together an emergency protocol that listed the identities and whereabouts of a new generation of heroes when the Avengers had momentarily disbanded. Heroes who were brought together by Iron Lad in order to form the Young Avengers and take down none other than Kang the Conqueror himself, who was actually also a future version of Iron Lad, and comic book time travel makes my head hurt. My point is, Vision has the power, the know-how, and the foresight to be a massive spanner in the works for any would-be time conquerors, and he should not be underestimated just because he's kind of dead at the moment. After all, should the Avengers truly need him, he can be rebuilt. I'm sure you can imagine that messing around with the time stream means that Kang has made a lot of enemies over the years, and some of those enemies are quite a bit more vindictive than others, such as the Egyptian god Khonshu, who MCU fans have recently been introduced to thanks to the Moon Knight series. As we saw in the show, Khonshu is no stranger to manipulating time himself, and Kang did at one point try to steal his magical totems which had been scattered across various time periods, all in order to boost his own power. But the old birdhead is not one to put up with these kinds of shenanigans, and he didn't just settle for sending his avatar Mark Spector after Kang. He went so far as to bring in various other avatars from other time periods as well, and had them all gang up on the guy to turn him even more black and blue than he already is. And then he had him kicked to the proverbial curb outside the timeline. He's also the one who got mad enough at Kang to send the West Coast Avengers and Doctor Strange back to ancient Egypt to beat up Rama-Tut in that story I mentioned earlier. So maybe the lesson to be learned here is don't go around pissing off ancient Egyptian gods. Dane Whitman is probably one of the last people you'd expect to pose much of a threat to someone like Kang. I mean, he's just some dude with a magical sword who takes Arthurian cosplay a little too seriously, right? Well, maybe, but he's always tried really hard to erase the legacy of his supervillainous uncle from whom he took his name and overall gimmick, and one of the ways he did this was by beating up Kang himself back when he first tried to join the Avengers. In this classic story, Kang had entered a wager with a powerful being known as the Grandmaster, all in order to be granted the power of life and death. Eventually, Kang managed to gain only one of these powers, choosing to have the power of death over the Avengers, which meant that Dane, who was not yet an official member of the team, was entirely unaffected. So, basically having a free go at Kang, Dane managed to kick his face in so hard that he eventually withdrew and lost his Avengers killing power. And just like that, Dane was a trusted member of the Avengers from then on. It really is very fitting for a heroic knight to defeat an unbeatable foe by exploiting a flaw in his dark magic, don't you think? For now, we're really just gonna have to wait and see how well Scott and Hope fare when they go up against Kang in Quantumania. I'm definitely curious as to just what the Big Blue Meanie is actually up to. But either way, we're in for some epic timey-wimey smackdowns.